Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The spokesman for the coalition forces in Iraq announced that about 300 out of the 700 members of the first new Iraqi army brigade resigned. Meanwhile, a U.S. spokesman reported that a U.S. soldier was killed and 14 others were wounded in a car bomb attack. 3 Iraqis were in the vehicle. They were also killed at the U.S. Army base near Ramadi, west of Baghdad. The U.S. military forces raided 2 houses in Tikrit, arresting 3 Iraqis suspected of their involvement in the operations against the coalition forces. The U.S. forces also discovered a large weapons cache in the front yard of one of the homes. The U.S. forces accused the 3 men of being loyalists to the previous regime, but the detainees denied these allegations. In Baquba, north of Baghdad, the U.S. forces, along with the Iraqi police, stopped 16 people in a joint operation. 100 Iraqi policemen and 150 U.S. soldiers from the 4th Armored Division, in cooperation with members of the Iraqi Civil Defense, raided the city and searched at least 300 homes. The Japanese 7th Infantry Division presented a military display of their trainings in preparation for their deployment to Iraq. The military show was in the city of Shituth in northern Hokkaido. 850 soldiers are part of the training. Most of them will work on providing humanitarian and medical aid. Also, they will distribute the food aid. 2 days ago, the Japanese government approved sending about 1,000 men to the city of Samawa in southern Iraq. 6 people were martyred and 7 others were wounded due to the Israeli incursions in the El Salem neighborhood at the Rafah refugee camp in Gaza. The Israeli army demolished a number of homes, claiming that Hamas and Islamic Jihad members were hiding there. They also destroyed a 3-story building in southern Gaza, wounding 14 Palestinians. 3 of them are in critical condition. Meanwhile, more than 25 families are now homeless.
The largest military operation to be conducted by the Israeli occupation forces in 2 months. It occurred at the Al-Salam neighborhood in Rafah in southern Gaza. They were pursuing an Islamic Jihad member. 20 vehicles, helicopters, and massive forces raided the neighborhood early this morning, surrounding a number of homes near the Martyrs Cemetery, engaging in violent confrontations with Palestinian resistance fighters. The Israeli troops randomly opened fire from their tanks, killing 5 Palestinians, including a paramedic, meanwhile wounding 18 other people, 3 of which are in critical condition.
One of our employees, Muhammad Zain, was shot in the head. He died during surgery. This clearly shows that the occupation forces opened fire at paramedics as they normally do in Rafah and other areas.
I saw a tank on the street. It was parked and people were just going about normally. I walked a couple of steps. Then they opened fire at me. My leg is injured from the joint to the lower bone.
The occupation forces withdrew from the area 8 hours later, leaving behind 7 completely destroyed homes. The 8th home was partially destroyed, leaving about 80 people homeless. They demolished their homes without allowing the residents to take their belongings. The occupation forces also detained 12 Palestinians, including Khalid al-Qadeh, a member of Al-Quds Brigades, the military wing of Islamic Jihad.
The tanks came at us from everywhere. They told us to get out and came in and searched our homes. Then they demolished them.
We are asking the entire world to come and look at this. Look at the actions of Israel, who wants peace and stability. They want us to sit with them and negotiate and be friends. Look at their actions. They are out of their minds.
The occupation forces claim that none of their soldiers were injured during this operation. In addition, they accuse Al-Qaeda of smuggling weapons via a tunnel to the Gaza Strip and participating in operations against Israeli targets. The Israeli military causes total destruction in Rafah almost on a daily basis, amid efforts to calm the situation down, thus putting more obstacles on the path to reaching a ceasefire. Azamadara, Al-Salam neighborhood, Rafah.
The United States decided to eliminate the countries who opposed the war in Iraq from getting contracts to rebuild the country. Reactions varied. Germany announced its objection to the American decision, and France said that it will investigate the legality of this decision under the international competition law. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Igor Ivanov met with German Foreign Minister Joschka Fischer in Berlin and said that the countries who are interested in rebuilding Iraq should be given an opportunity to do so. And Canada says that Washington's decision is difficult to understand.
In the past, Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz's statements generated many reactions since they are known to be extreme. However, this time the reactions are directed toward the controversial decision published on the Department of Defense website. The decision excludes countries who oppose the war on Iraq from getting contracts for reconstructing the country. Wolfowitz defended this decision by saying, to preserve the interests of the United States, major contracts will be limited to American and Iraqi companies and to the countries that have troops in Iraq. Paul Wolfowitz, Deputy Secretary of Defense. Americans believe that by excluding the countries who oppose the war and refuse to send troops to Iraq, that this will persuade them to join the military efforts in the future. Meanwhile, France, Germany, Russia, and Canada are very unhappy with this decision. However, their reactions vary. Germany clearly voiced their objection by stating, excluding German companies from reconstructing Iraq is unacceptable to the German government. This is not what we agreed on, and that is to move forward and not dwell on the past. Billa Anda, the spokesman for the German government. France's reaction was less fierce, even though they may be more affected by this decision than Germany. We are investigating if this decision complies with the international competition law. We are consulting with our companies, particularly in the European Union and European Council. Hervé Atzos, the spokesman for the French Foreign Ministry. Canada responded by saying that it will be difficult for them to continue to make financial contributions for the reconstruction of Iraq if their companies were deprived from getting contracts in that country. These contracts are worth $18.6 billion. 63 countries, with the U.S. being on the top of that list, are able to bid on these contracts. Analysts believe that the United States' excuse of protecting the U.S. national security to exclude the countries who oppose the war is not convincing. The justification that was used by the White House to launch its war on Iraq was not convincing to many countries. Prominent members in the United Nations Security Council, like Germany, France, and Russia, are now demanding the U.S. to let them see the results of the inspections for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Their position raises questions about this mysterious file and puts it at the center of attention. This comes as Scott Ritter, the former head of the UN inspection team, renews his criticism of the Bush administration, saying that the war in Iraq was justified by the need to establish a permanent U.S. presence in Iraq so it can be used as a stage for establishing American hegemony over the entire world at the political and economic levels. Amid criticism against President Bush due to increased military losses, new tensions started rising between the U.S. and what is known as the European Peace Camp. Most of the UN Security Council members demanded that the U.S. let them see the results of the U.S. inspection operations for weapons of mass destruction, which was the reason for launching the war on Iraq. The European Peace Camp, represented by France, Germany, and Russia, criticized the U.S. and its ally Britain for the lack of transparency because they refused to reveal the results of the weapons inspections in Iraq. Furthermore, the coalition forces insist on preventing Almavik from returning to Iraq, which may be considered as a violation to UN Security Council Resolution 1483. The resolution gives the responsibility of removing weapons of mass destruction, if found in Iraq, to Almavik and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Despite all of that, Britain and the United States emphasize that they respect their commitments and justify the refusal of releasing the results of the inspection operations by saying that they include secret information that can only be released at the right time. The argument started when the U.S. refused to allow the International Atomic Energy Agency to see the report of David Kaye, the head of the U.S. inspection team in Iraq, which was submitted to Congress last October. In his report, Kaye emphasized that his team, which is composed of 1,400 inspectors, could not find weapons of mass destruction during the past 6 months of inspection operations. Some say that if Washington withdraws Kaye from Iraq, it may backfire on President Bush, especially considering that possessing weapons of mass destruction was the main justification for launching the war without the approval of the international community. Another indication for the failure of the American inspection team in finding banned weapons in Iraq is the fact that the team was assigned a new duty of gathering intelligence information about the Iraqi resistance. Nonetheless, sources from the U.S. Defense Department said that it is likely that the biological and chemical weapons experts may be asked to come back to the United States.
Israeli television said 3 people were killed and 15 wounded Thursday in an explosion which rocked central Tel Aviv. According to witnesses quoted by the television, the explosion took place near the Aroma Cafe, close to the busy Allenby Street in the commercial district of the city. Early reports by the Israeli media appeared to indicate that a mafia leader was among the dead, hinting that the explosion was criminally motivated and not a Palestinian operation. Israeli fighter jets again violated the Lebanese airspace on Thursday, despite UN calls for a halt. Warplanes flew over the southern city of Tyre. This comes a day after Lebanon filed a complaint at the UN Security Council to look against Israel's killing of 2 Lebanese civilians in the southern Lebanese territory. President Emil Lahoud had told the UNIFIL, the UN peacekeeping force in the south, retrieved the 2 bodies from the Israeli occupation forces and handed them to the Red Cross.
Lebanon was quick to lodge a complaint at the UN Security Council against Israel's killing of 2 Lebanese civilians in the Wazani area in southern Lebanon, close to the border village of Ghajar. Lebanese Foreign Minister Jean Abed said the attack violated Lebanon's sovereignty, broke international law, ignored the UN drawn blue line, and expanded the military front beyond the Israeli-occupied Shebaa Farms area. President Emil Lahoud, who is currently in Geneva for the Information Summit, discussed with UN Secretary General Kofi Annan the Israeli killing in the south. He said the aggression took place inside the Lebanese territory and Israel is fully responsible for this. The two martyrs, Muhammad Hadi Sheet and Khudr Arabi, were out hunting when Israeli occupation forces shot them in their BMW car. Lebanese sources said the two, who were from Kfarkila, know the region quite well, so it would be impossible for them to cross the Lebanese border deep inside the Palestinian territories, as Israel claims.
My son got hired for a good job. On Wednesday, he was to start. He said he wanted to go out before he starts his job. He went out to hunt while I was asleep at noon. I swear that my son is not affiliated to any party. I fear for my children a lot.
Lebanese security forces, which took to the area for investigations, found the car near one of the resorts there. Israel claimed the two martyrs clashed with its forces, but then it admitted they were only civilians. Occupation soldiers trespassed the territory and took the two bodies. The UNIFIL, which was completely off the spot, expressed its deep sorrow and got engaged in negotiations to retrieve the two bodies back and handed them to the Lebanese Red Cross.
UNIFIL expresses its deep anguish and sorrow at the killing of two armed Lebanese civilians yesterday in the Wazani area by the Israeli Defense Forces. This unfortunate incident underscores the tension prevailing along the blue line. I have urged the parties to exercise caution and prudence in this charged atmosphere prevailing along the blue line. In this context, I met today with the IDF General Officer Commanding Northern Command, General Benny Gantz. I would like to state here that UNIFIL will continue to do its utmost to preserve calm along the blue line.
Hezbollah said in a statement that the killing of Sheet and Arabi is a grave violation of the sovereignty of Lebanon and held Israel responsible for this ugly crime.
EU External Relations Commissioner Chris Patton called the U.S. decision to exclude countries that oppose the war in Iraq from reconstruction contracts extremely unhelpful. He said the decision risked reopening old wounds at a time when the United States should be canvassing as much international support as possible to rebuild occupied Iraq. The EU Commission will investigate whether the ruling violated the rules of the World Trade Organization.
The Pentagon has decided to prevent companies from France, Germany, Russia and Canada, along with other countries opposing the US-led war against Iraq, from bidding $18.6 billion in reconstruction contracts. Washington denied it was seeking to punish these countries, adding that they could become eligible if they joined the US-led coalition.
Perfectly appropriate and reasonable to expect that the prime contracts for reconstruction funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars would go to the Iraqi people in those countries who are working with the United States on this difficult task of building a free, prosperous, and sovereign Iraq for the Iraqi people. If countries decide they want to participate in the efforts and join the efforts of the coalition forces in Iraq, then circumstances can change, and we would be glad to discuss those matters with countries.
The decision was roundly denounced by Russia, Germany and Canada and could complicate the U.S. effort to gain an international consensus for relieving Iraq's $125 billion in foreign debt. Germany said the decision is not acceptable.
From our sides, all I can say is that we noted the reports today with astonishment, and we will be speaking about it with the American side.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Ivanov said that Russia had no plans to write off the $8 billion that Iraq owes it.
As a whole, Russia has great economic interest in Iraq. You know, Iraq is not a poor country at all, and it is absolutely wrong to compare Iraq to Afghanistan. Iraq's debt to the Russian Federation comes to $8 billion. And as far as the Russian government's position on this, it is not planning any kind of write-off of that debt. Iraq is not a poor country.
U.S. President George W. Bush late Wednesday called French President Jacques Chirac, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder to confer about Iraqi debt and the country's reconstruction. The calls were aimed at asking the leaders to make sure that U.S. envoy on Iraqi debt, James Baker, is received well in Europe. Angered Canada said that it might now end its contributions to Iraqi reconstruction.
I find it really very difficult to fathom. First of all, Canada's put in close to $300 million in terms of the reconstruction of Iraq. We have troops in Afghanistan and are carrying a very, very heavy load in that country. Well, I find it very difficult to understand the statement that was made.
The European Commission said it was investigating whether the ruling violated global trade rules, and France said it was studying the decision while expressing doubts about the legality of the US move. The move might enjoy some domestic support in the US, but it will surely strain relations at a time efforts were being made to heal deep wounds between Washington and the anti-war camp. And the White House was straightforward when it said it is necessary for the protection of essential security interests for the United States to limit competition for the prime contracts in occupied Iraq.
At least one U.S. soldier and an Afghan civilian were wounded as militants fired nearly a dozen rockets at a coalition military base in the troubled southeast Afghanistan. This comes as the United Nations Thursday expressed shock at the death of 6 more children in a U.S. raid on suspected militants in the eastern part of the country, and warned that such incidents help the Taliban cause. In the meantime, hundreds of Afghan delegates were preparing to debate and ratify Afghanistan's new constitution, paving the way for the war-ravaged country's final transition to democracy. Afghanistan gears up for a crucial Grand Assembly or the Loya Jirga to approve a new constitution. Delegates traveled from all corners of the country to attend the Kabul meeting and decide on the shape of Afghanistan's future government ahead of the nation's first democratic elections next year. But the United Nations gave a stark warning ahead of the meeting, saying that more than 2 years after the Taliban's overthrow, efforts to save Afghanistan could fail without greater international commitment. A resurgent Taliban has vowed to disrupt the Loya Jirga, which could last several weeks, calling it a US-staged charade. It said any of the 500 delegates attending deserved to die. Both President Hamid Karzai and US Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad have said the threat to the assembly is real, and last Saturday a bomb exploded in the city of Kandahar, wounding 18 people in what Karzai said was part of the disruption campaign. Even without the threat of attack, the Grand Assembly meeting will not be straightforward, and the UN Special Representative to Afghanistan, Lakhdar Brahimi, predicted a difficult debate. Karzai will be trying to persuade delegates to adopt a draft constitution that will give the president sweeping powers. He has vowed he will not stand in polls supposed to be held next June if powerful opponents like Defense Minister Mohammad Qasim Fahim get their way and dilute the president's power with a prime ministry. Meanwhile, efforts continue to transform Afghanistan from a country dominated by warlords with private militias into a centralized state with a national army. On Wednesday, a convoy of Soviet-designed weaponry ranging from Scud surface-to-surface missiles to tanks, field guns and multiple rocket launchers wove through the rugged Panjshir Valley under the direction of international peacekeepers. The weapons, which belong to the faction loyal to Afghanistan's powerful defense minister, were being moved down from its stronghold north of Kabul to hand them over to the fledgling National Army.
The Deputy Prime Minister Ehud Olmert said that if Israel withdraws unilaterally, the unity of Jerusalem will be maintained, adding that the new border lines will not comply with the borders of 1967. He explained that he made his proposal because they have reached a decisive moment. Our reporter Eli Nissan provides us with this report.
Lots of words, but little actions. That is how one can describe what happened in the latest meeting of the governing coalition members. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said that this kind of meetings has never experienced this intensive media coverage. Press and television reporters are anticipating the reactions of the government coalition members on Ehud Olmert proposal, calling for unilateral Israeli withdrawal from Palestinian territories, including some parts of Jerusalem. The entire meeting was dedicated for discussing the proposal of Ehud Olmert, which called for drawing the borders unilaterally. Members of the coalition government did not get an opportunity to discuss Olmert's announcements because reporters insisted on talking to Ehud Olmert about his position.
I said that I absolutely support maintaining the unity of Jerusalem under the sovereignty of Israel. I'm not naive. Some asked me which neighborhoods of Jerusalem I refer to, and I told them that I support maintaining the unity of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Did you clarify the subject matter with the Likud party, and will you get a majority support for your plan?
I said that I have no doubt that the overwhelming majority of those who voted for the Likud party support the suggestions that I have made. That is the need to unilaterally draw the borders between us and the Palestinians. These borders will not comply with the 1967 borders under any circumstances.
What reactions are you getting from settlers and others after publishing your plan?
Some settlers do not support my position. However, I have no doubt that many settlers deep inside their heart support my positions. I think that there will be surprises in this regard.
Why did you choose this time to announce your positions?
It is now clear for us that the new Palestinian government is not ready or serious in making decisions on issues that would pave the way for negotiations. So what should we do? Should we wait for a third party, fourth and fifth Palestinian government?
The police continue its investigation, trying to find the identities of those who placed the pictures of Deputy Prime Minister Ehud Olmert along with the pictures of Hitler. The incident happened after Yedaot Ahramot published a report about his support for the unilateral Israeli withdrawal from Palestinian territories if the two sides fail to reach an agreement. These announcements were criticized by some Likud members, but others praised them.
The Iranian lawyer Shireen Ebadi gave a brave speech during the ceremony of the Nobel Peace Prize Awards in Oslo. Ebadi criticized the American administration for ignoring UN resolutions concerning the Middle East and using them as justifications for launching the war in Iraq. In Oslo, the Iranian lawyer Shireen Ebadi received a royal welcome in the Nobel Peace Prize award ceremony. Ebadi, who is the first Muslim woman to receive this award, gave a speech clearly criticizing the U.S. for violating international law by detaining suspects in Guantanamo Bay.
During the past 2 years, some countries used the September 11th attacks and the international war on terrorism as a pretext for breaches of human rights principles and international law.
Shireen Ebadi also condemned the double standard policy used by Western countries.
Dozens of UN resolutions concerning the Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands were ignored, while Iraq and its people have been subjected to sanctions, military attacks, and military occupation, first with the approval of the UN Security Council, and the second time despite its objection.
Meanwhile, Shireen Ebadi emphasized that Islam is not contradictory to human rights, saying that the plight of women in Islamic states and the lack of freedom and democracy is caused by the patriarchal and male-dominated culture prevailing in these societies, not in Islam. The president of the Nobel Committee gave Ebadi the award, which consists of a certificate and a gold medallion, in addition to a check of $1.4 million.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. And the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.